As the 2024 U.S. election approaches, the world waits with bated breath to see who will lead one of the most powerful nations on Earth. Will it be former President Donald Trump, the outspoken businessman known for his America First policies, or Vice President Kamala Harris? The answer could shift international relations, benefiting some countries while leaving others in precarious positions. So in this video, we will explore which countries would likely win and which ones would lose depending upon who becomes the next president, and most importantly, the effect on global climate. First, let's talk about Donald Trump. Number 10. Russia wins.
I knew Putin. I knew him well.
Putin would give him back, yes.
I think I'd have a very good relationship with President Putin.
If Putin likes Donald Trump, guess what, folks? That's called an asset, not a liability. Now,
One of the biggest winners under a Trump presidency is likely to be Russia. Throughout his first term, Trump maintained an unusually cordial relationship with Russian President Vladimir Putin, often raising eyebrows among U.S. allies. Trump's skepticism toward NATO, an organization designed to counter Russian influence, could further weaken the alliance. If Trump continues this trend, NATO could become less cohesive, which would give Russia more room to maneuver in Eastern Europe. Putin would likely capitalize on a fractured European alliance, and with NATO's strength diminished, Russia might expand its influence into areas like Ukraine, Georgia, or even NATO member states with more subtle political interference. Number 9. China loses.
We're not talking about somebody from China at a low level. The vice chairman of China came out that he wants to see a deal made. He wants it to be made under calm conditions, using the word calm. I agree with him on that.
One of Trump's most significant international battles during his first term was his trade war with China. Through tariffs and sanctions, Trump sought to reduce the U.S. trade deficit with China and curb the country's growing global influence. These policies hurt China's economy, particularly its manufacturing and export sectors. If Trump is re-elected, his administration is likely to intensify efforts to counter China through more aggressive trade policies, military posturing in the South China Sea, and perhaps even stronger sanctions. Number 8. North Korea wins.
And I want to thank Chairman Kim for something else. When I put out the social media notification, if he didn't show up, the press was going to make me look very bad. So you made us both look good, and I appreciate it.
North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, would also be a likely winner under a second Trump presidency. Trump's approach to North Korea was unconventional. He was the first sitting U.S. president to meet face-to-face with a North Korean leader, legitimizing the isolated regime in the eyes of the international community. While no concrete steps toward denuclearization were achieved, the meetings boosted North Korea's standing. A return to Trump's presidency might further this pattern of diplomacy without significant concessions. North Korea could continue to develop its nuclear capabilities without fear of serious repercussions, gaining more leverage on the global stage. Number 7. Germany loses.
Germany is totally controlled by Russia because they were getting from 60 to 70% of their energy from Russia and a new pipeline. And you tell me if that's appropriate, because I think it's not. And I think it's a very bad thing for NATO, and I don't think it should have happened.
Germany, the economic powerhouse of Europe, would likely face challenges under a Trump presidency. Trump has long been critical of Germany's trade surplus with the U.S. and its reliance on Russian energy. His administration might impose tariffs on German goods, creating economic strain. Furthermore, Trump's criticism of NATO could leave Europe's defense weakened, placing more pressure on Germany to shoulder the burden of Europe's security. Chancellor Olaf Scholz would find it difficult to navigate these tensions, especially as Germany tries to maintain its leadership role in Europe while dealing with the fallout of weakened transatlantic relations. Number 6. Israel wins.
Bibi and I have known each other a long time. A smart man, great negotiator. And I think we're going to make a deal. It might be a bigger and better deal than people in this room even understand. That's a possibility.
Under Trump, Israel experienced significant diplomatic victories, notably the controversial decision to move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem in 2018, a move that signaled American recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. For Israel, this action, alongside Trump's support for Israeli settlements, solidified a close U.S.-Israel relationship. If Trump wins in 2024, Israel is likely to enjoy continued U.S. support. With ongoing tensions in the Middle East, Israel could further strengthen its geopolitical position, particularly against adversaries like Iran. Trump's previous actions under the Abraham Accords, which saw several Arab nations normalize relations with Israel, might be further advanced, bringing greater stability and strategic depth to the region. Number 5. Canada loses.
Canada does not treat us right in terms of the farming and the crossing the borders. Canada has been very tough on this country when it comes to timber, lumber, and other things.
Despite their shared border, the relationship between Canada and the U.S. was strained under Trump, particularly during the renegotiation of the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, which Trump criticized as unfair to American workers. The resulting USMCA United States-Mexico-Canada agreement resolved some issues, but tensions remained high between Trump and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. A second Trump term could mean more unpredictability for Canada. Trade disputes might arise again, and the close economic ties between the two nations could face strain if Trump pushes for more protectionist policies. Number 4. Saudi Arabia wins.
We've become very good friends over a fairly short period of time. I was in Saudi Arabia in May, and we are bringing back hundreds of billions of dollars into the United States.
Saudi Arabia, a key U.S. ally in the Middle East, also stands to benefit if Trump returns to power. During his first term, Trump maintained a strong relationship with Saudi Arabia, approving arms deals and backing the kingdom despite criticisms over its human rights record, including the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Under Trump, Saudi Arabia could continue to rely on U.S. military and political support, allowing it to maintain its influence in the Middle East. Number 3. Iran loses.
One of the greatest security threats facing peace-loving nations today is the repressive regime in Iran.
Under Trump, Iran faced crippling sanctions following the U.S. withdrawal from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, commonly known as the Iran nuclear deal. The sanctions devastated Iran's economy, leading to inflation, unemployment, and unrest within the country. If Trump returns, Iran can expect more of the same. Trump's hardline stance on Iran may lead to further isolation of the country from international markets, and the threat of military confrontation might increase, especially in response to Iran's nuclear activities. Number 2. United Kingdom wins.
Dealing with the European Union, I hate to say this to you, but dealing with the European Union is very difficult. They drive a hard bargain.
Post-Brexit, the United Kingdom faced many uncertainties about its future outside of the European Union. Trump was a vocal supporter of the Brexit movement, encouraging Britain to leave the EU. A Trump presidency could pave the way for favorable trade agreements between the US and the UK, helping the country stabilize after Brexit. Future British leaders might find an ally in Trump, who has criticized multilateral organizations like the EU and encouraged nationalism. Number 1. Global climate efforts lose. Perhaps the biggest loser under a second Trump presidency would be the global climate movement. During his first term, Trump withdrew the U.S. from the Paris Climate Agreement, rolled back environmental regulations, and promoted fossil fuels like coal and oil. His administration's actions set back efforts to combat climate change both domestically and globally. A Trump return would likely mean a further rollback of environmental protections and less U.S. participation in international climate initiatives. Given the U.S.'s significant role in global emissions, this would have serious consequences for the planet. Now, let's step into Kamala Harris's world. A champion of diplomacy and global cooperation, Harris represents a shift back to traditional alliances. But what does that mean for countries around the world? Number 10. European allies win. One of the key promises of a Kamala Harris presidency would be a return to traditional alliances, especially with European nations. For Germany and France, this shift represents a significant win. After years of fluctuating relations with the U.S. under Trump, who emphasized an America First agenda and sometimes criticized NATO, Harris would likely restore trust and collaboration within NATO and the European Union. Harris's leadership would focus on revitalizing NATO, strengthening collective defense, and reaffirming the U.S. commitment to the security of Europe. Number 9. China wins.
Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is, under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century.
China stands as one of the countries that could benefit from a Harris presidency. While Harris is expected to maintain a critical stance on human rights issues in China, her approach to trade and diplomacy would likely differ from Trump's. Trump's trade wars with China created tension, leading to economic instability and fluctuating tariffs. Harris's strategy, however, would be more multilateral and cooperative, focusing on engaging with China through international institutions. By de-escalating the trade war, Harris could pave the way for smoother U.S.-China relations, particularly in terms of trade agreements and economic partnerships. Number 8. Russia loses.
In the case of Russia's actions in Ukraine, we have examined the evidence. We know the legal standards. And there is no doubt these are crimes against humanity.
While China may find space for cooperation, Russia would likely face a more confrontational relationship under Harris. Her stance on Russia would be tougher than Trump's, especially on issues like election interference, cybersecurity attacks, and sanctions. Harris would likely continue or even increase sanctions against Russia for its interference in U.S. elections and its aggressive actions in Ukraine. Number 7. North Korea loses.
In the North, we see a brutal dictatorship, rampant human rights violations, and an unlawful weapons program that threatens peace and stability.
Similarly, North Korea would see fewer opportunities for direct engagement under a Harris presidency. While Trump pursued unprecedented face-to-face meetings with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, Harris would likely return to a more traditional approach of multilateral talks and strengthening alliances with South Korea and Japan. Kim Jong-un's regime could face increased isolation, as Harris would likely prioritize strengthening sanctions and diplomatic pressure in coordination with international partners. Number 6. Iran wins. Iran stands to benefit from a Harris presidency, especially in terms of re-engaging with the U.S. on diplomatic fronts. Trump's decision to withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal, JCPOA, led to heightened tensions, economic sanctions, and the isolation of Iran from the global community. Harris, however, is expected to push for the U.S. to re-enter the nuclear deal, provided that Iran complies with its obligations. A renewed nuclear deal could lead to the lifting of sanctions and the reintegration of Iran into the global economy. Number 5. Saudi Arabia loses. For Saudi Arabia, a Harris presidency would bring significant challenges. While the U.S.-Saudi alliance has been strong under previous administrations, Harris's focus on human rights would put a strain on this relationship. Saudi Arabia's human rights record, particularly regarding its involvement in the Yemeni conflict and the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, would likely come under increased scrutiny. Harris would probably re-examine U.S. arms deals with Saudi Arabia, especially in light of the ongoing war in Yemen. Number 4. Canada wins. Under a Harris administration, Canada would likely see strengthened ties with the U.S. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government, could expect a more stable and cooperative relationship compared to the occasionally tumultuous interactions with Trump. Harris's focus on diplomacy, climate change, and trade would align closely with Canada's priorities. One of the key areas where Canada would benefit is climate cooperation. Harris's strong stance on environmental issues would complement Canada's climate goals, leading to deeper collaboration on reducing carbon emissions, promoting green energy, and addressing environmental challenges across North America. Number 3. Mexico wins.
The agreements that we have reached, again, are the result of all of the work leading up to this week, and they are very tangible and very specific. Do I declare this trip a success? Yes, I do.
Mexico would emerge as one of the clear winners under Harris's presidency, particularly due to her more humane approach to immigration and border issues. While Trump's administration focused on building physical barriers and implementing strict immigration policies, Harris advocated for immigration reform and cooperation between the two nations. Harris's policies would likely focus on addressing the root causes of migration from Central America, such as poverty, violence, and climate change, rather than solely focusing on border enforcement. Number 2. Israel faces challenges.
Israel has a right to defend itself, and how it does so matters.
While Israel would maintain strong ties with the U.S. under a Harris presidency, it could face certain challenges. Harris would likely push for renewed Israeli-Palestinian peace talks, advocating for a two-state solution. This approach could create friction with the Israeli leadership, particularly if it involves concessions on issues like settlement expansion or Jerusalem's status. While Harris is expected to uphold U.S. security commitments to Israel, her administration would adopt a more balanced approach, encouraging diplomacy with the Palestinian Authority and promoting peace in the region. Number 1. Global climate efforts win.
And our future is really bright if we prioritize them, and therefore prioritize the climate crisis and the need to address it.
On a broader scale, the entire world could stand to benefit from Harris's strong commitment to addressing climate change. Under Trump, the U.S. withdrew from the Paris Agreement, leading to concerns about America's role in global environmental efforts. Harris, however, has pledged to rejoin the Paris Agreement and push forward ambitious climate policies. Harris's leadership would see the U.S. take a prominent role in combating global warming, promoting clean energy, and encouraging international cooperation on environmental issues. Now you clearly know which countries will win and which countries will lose. So, here's a question we want to hear from you. Who do you think is the best candidate for global leadership? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.